Well, we are here today with Rosalind Joffee, who is going to be talking to us about regaining some power in the workplace. And Rosalind, thank you so much for being with us. Rosalind is a career coach who works with people who live with chronic conditions, and an author and a speaker, and I know she has some great information she's going to share today that those of you out there who are working or considering working or maybe are just wondering what to do in the future as far as a career will really gain something from. Thank you so much, Rosalind.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Oftentimes we have health problems. It can leave us feeling like we've completely lost control. And when you are working with clients in your coaching career and your own experiences, what kind of suggestions do you have for people to help them regain a sense of control, that they're in charge of their lives despite the chronic conditions they're suffering from?
Well, that's a great question, Lisa. I've lived with chronic illness and pain for over 35 years now, and what I've seen for myself is that it's really important to identify what are the areas where you can take charge. One of the issues of feeling you've lost control is that, in fact, you have lost control of your body in a way that when you get an illness or a pain condition, it's this unfamiliar landscape. It's not a cold. You can't just take aspirin or whatever other medical remedies you might have. It's not a flu. This is something you're going to be living with for a long time. Often it's unpredictable. So there's all kinds of ways in which you really feel your body is now beyond your sense of control. And in fact, as we've seen, a lot of life really is. So what I work on with my clients is, rather than thinking of it as taking control, it's more about taking charge where you can. Because control has a sort of heavy-handedness to it, a tightness. And when we take charge, we're leading. So what I suggest to people is that when you're dealing with a chronic health problem of any kind, but something that is there and it's not going to get better, it might wax and wane, you want to figure out where are the areas in your life that you feel you can start taking charge, and work on that, really. Embellish that, mine that, cultivate that area.
Now, we frequently hear people being told that if they're living with a chronic illness or a lot of chronic pain, that they should not work, that they should stay home, take care of themselves, rest, regardless of maybe where they're at that moment. They're often told, don't work. That's not good for you. What is your response to situations like that?
Well, as a coach, my role is not to really give advice. So my response is to check in with someone. Is this what you want? Do you want to do some more research on this? Who told you this, and how much have they really taken you into account? So I'm figuring if someone's contacting me about this issue, they're not quite comfortable with it. Sometimes it's a physician. I've had clients who told me that with one test, particularly with certain diseases, after one test that says, yes, you do have, for instance, multiple sclerosis, you probably should not work or at least be in a less stressful job, even if the person isn't having trouble. Now, that's an extreme, but it can happen. I've also talked to many people who've said that their friends, their family encourages them to slow down, that work is bad for them, that work is stressful, and they shouldn't work. My suggestion is figure out what's going to be best for you, and that's not easy. It would be much easier to have someone else write you a blueprint. But at the end of the day, to leave the workforce, if you are currently employed, once you leave the workforce, it is much harder to re-enter, particularly if you then have gaps in your resume or you don't have a solid career behind you. But even with that, and especially if you're a woman, because there's still gender issues, especially if you're getting older, because there's a lot of ageism. Once you leave the workforce, you're taking a step off of a track that's harder than ever to get back on. So I would, if you're asking for my advice, it would be think long and hard. Is this the best thing to do, or are there other options for me?
So it sounds like the word work sometimes can be very generalized. A physician might not even know what you do as a career or a job, and they'd say, stop working, versus looking at the individual person, the situation, maybe the season of the disease, how it's progressing, as well as what kind of work they do, and if it's something they enjoy versus something that's just an income coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Once again, it's who's giving you the information, and are they looking at your whole picture, but also that's from that other person's perspective. And it really comes down to you deciding, gathering as much information as you can about what your options are. These days, most people don't feel they have a lot of options regarding work or not. It's not easy to move around and change jobs. So you could feel you're in a pretty toxic environment. You could be employed someplace where it doesn't feel at all good to you, and it is making you feel like you're worn out. The question becomes, do you have to leave entirely, or are there some possibilities for maybe taking work that might mean you're a little underemployed for now, but that would help you later on if you want to re-enter again and go back into a more career path? I really feel that the bottom line here is to not make any decisions too quickly, but to also try to listen and check in with yourself as carefully as you can about what your whole array of needs are. And that's health, but as well as your psycho and social needs and financial. Does that answer that question?
Yes, and oftentimes the person that's giving the advice doesn't know the answer to all of those things. Mm-hmm. They may understand you do or do not need the financial income, or that you do or do not love your job, but they don't understand the entire big picture with all those influences.
Yes, and I would also say that one of the things that I make a big point of in my book, and I found in my own personal experience, I stopped working briefly after 20 years of working daily, every day for 20 years, and I had young children. I stopped working when I became so sick, and I found I really was more bereft than ever, because I really missed that engagement of what work gives you. And we did need the income as well. I was unable to go back to what I needed, what I had been doing. But I think that what I learned from that, and what I've seen with many of the people with whom I've worked, is that work is a vital resource. And in fact, many studies have shown that people have better health outcomes when they can continue to work. People with illness and pain have better health outcomes when they continue to work. Now, I'm sure there are studies that show the opposite too, that bad environments in particular, where you've got difficult bosses or you have to work unusually hard hours, that's clearly not good for you. So it's about deciding and thinking strategically, having a long-term plan of what's going to be in your best interest.
Okay, now one of the other ideas you have for regaining power in the workplace is the topic of disclosure. And this is a word that I hear frequently among people who are in the workforce and have a chronic illness. And you talk about this frequently yourself, as well as have a booklet devoted to this topic. Can you tell us a little bit about what disclosure is exactly, and some ideas to consider as far as if you should disclose about your illness?
Mm-hmm. I can, actually, because it's something that I have written and talked about a lot, and it comes up all the time with the folks that I talk with. with whom I speak. Um, for one thing, disclosure generally refers to the first time you talk about it. You're disclosing something about yourself. In this case, you are telling people for the first time, whether it's a supervisor, a colleague, or even people who work for you, that you live with a chronic illness or a health condition. And so when we talk about disclosure, we're typically talking about that first event. What I suggest that people realize is that disclosure is just really the top, the tip of the iceberg. The ongoing conversation can be just as difficult, in fact, usually more difficult. But if you do, in that first conversation, if you lay this out in a way that's in your best interest and positions you positively, you're more likely to have more productive and effective ongoing conversations. So one thing that I suggest to people is, and this is something I talk about a lot, figure out first, what is your purpose? What do you want to have happen from this conversation, if it's disclosure? What do you want to have happen? Do you want people to understand when you're not coming to work? Are you just looking for their empathy and their understanding? Are you looking for specifics here that you want to be able to work around in a specific way, or do you need literally accommodations, physical accommodations or a different schedule? So start with that. What do I want to have happen? When you have that, everything then flows from there. Your conversation really sort of flows, because now it should all meet that point of what do I want to have happen. When you're disclosing and telling people for the first time about an illness, there are several things you want to keep in mind. You want to keep it as simple as possible. Whether you say the name of the illness or not is up to you. Many people choose not to. Sometimes that's a distraction in that first conversation. And in fact, it's better just to talk about what are my symptoms and how do they impact my work. So if it's fatigue, particularly in the morning, and it means I have to get to work a little bit late and have a later start time, that's where you start with. I have an illness or a condition that slows me down dramatically in the morning, and I have to start later later as the morning goes on. So keep it as simple as possible. Talk about the symptoms and how they impact you. The second point is, think about what the other person how the other person might respond as you say this, and take that person into account, who this person is and what you know about this person. So as you design your message, make it clear that this is not going to be a burden on anyone, and that, in fact, it's not going to be a burden because you know how to deal with this. Even if you're feeling unsure yourself, if it's a fairly new diagnosis, they don't need to know this. That's just going to create worry and concern for other people. That this might be a burden for them, that they're going, whether your emotional trauma or whatever, or that who knows what's going to happen. You want to make it clear that you do have an idea. Not that necessarily you can predict day to day, but that you understand the scope of how this is going to impact you. It's going to reassure the other person greatly. And thirdly, keep your emotions to yourself. Whatever you do, don't show how you feel about this if it's negative. And most of us do feel negative about it. This is not the place to share your emotions. So just think about it as you would think about anything in your life or in anyone's life which makes them somewhat different, and they have to share it with other people. Normalize this as you convey your message. The more you normalize it, the better off you are. Finally, and this is something I didn't write in the booklet, and I haven't really written, but I've really come upon over the last few years, is that it's very important to check in, and this is for the ongoing conversation. Let the other person know who should know this, discuss how those people will find out. Are you going to tell the rest of the team, or do you want your supervisor to do it, or discuss disclosure to other people, or if you want to keep it private. And if this is your boss or a colleague, let them know how you feel about them checking in with you. Because many people have told me how it's so irritating when their boss keeps asking every day, so how are you doing? Or anytime you're home sick with your sick child, or you've got a cold and your boss or a colleague is hovering. It can feel really annoying. So you need to let this person know what kind of communication you want. On the other hand, if your boss or a colleague never brings it up again, it can feel bizarre because you're wondering if they even remember it. So putting in some moments to talk about the ongoing conversation, how that may happen, is you're setting the ground rules for the future. And that's a really important thing to be able to do.
Yes, obviously disclosure is something that we have to handle very carefully. And many of us don't want to be in the position of thinking we're feeling deceptive, and we also don't want to talk about it too much. So what is the name of your booklet? Because I know this is something a lot of people are going to want to follow up on.
It's on my website, and there's 3 booklets that are sold together. It's Career Thrive. It's a Career Thrive series.
Okay.
And one of them is Are You Talking? And it really goes through these specifics.
Okay, great. Because I think that's what a lot of people would need, are some real specifics of things to say, not to say, things to consider, because every person, every job, and every illness is all unique among itself.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of details.
It is a lot of details. That's why when I write, I don't write about tips, because tips are this is what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Uh-huh.
I try to encourage to think strategically about themselves. Think the big picture. And that's why when you start this, whether it's disclosure or whether you're leaving your job, what do you want to have happen is a really good question to ask yourself.
Definitely. Now, all of us know that when we're living with chronic illness, different pain conditions, that kind of thing, it can get depressing. There's moments that we can really feel down, and especially if we are trying to get back to work or keep up a job, as well as our house, our family, and managing our illness. So what are some suggestions you would have to encourage a person to be able to do more than just live in that survival mode?
So here again, if I think about it, is what do I want to have happen for myself? Do I want to be happier? Do I want to be more engaged? What is it that I want? So let's say you're saying, I want to feel better every day when I wake up emotionally and more upbeat than I'm feeling now. The next thing to ask yourself is, what are the things that make me feel upbeat? And if I dig back in my past, what does that for me? So I could say to someone, yeah, having a job always kept me upbeat. It sort of distracted me, but it might not for you. Or certainly one job might do it for me, but another job might not. So you need to figure out what are the things. I know in my life it's been feeling that even if my body is giving out, my brain is still working, and I'm interacting with other people. That keeps me upbeat. But volunteering or going and sitting, and playing bridge wouldn't do it for me. I'm someone who really feels better about myself when there is something that is intellectual and work-related. There's an income involved with it, and I'm creating something. So you have to figure that out piece by piece. What are the things that, if I look in my history, in the past, when did I feel good and what was I doing? And then try to see how you can integrate it into your life now. So if it is work, but you don't have work, and it's really not possible because you don't have skills, or you have children at home and you can just about take care of them and you don't have the finances to do both, then it's about putting into your life those pieces, even in small pieces, that will change your day-to-day experience. And that's that whole issue of taking charge again. So if you're someone for many of us where work is very important, it's also about the structure of what work does. So if you know that about yourself, then you can go, okay, so it's not just work. It's not just going in and clocking in someplace. I like structure. Or I like to have interchange with people. I don't like to be alone when my kids go off to school, or if I live alone in my house and I face a whole day alone. It's really dreary. So you want to build in ways to balance that out, and make sure that the only people you are seeing are not just your healthcare team. There are other people where you have a social relationship or some kind of a relationship which gives back to you. And that goes, once again, it's back to that strategic thinking about who you are. Bigger picture than just, I have to do this, this, and this on any given day.
Now, your fifth idea about taking charge over your life is it's having to do with when we have the need to talk about our illness. And what I'm speaking of is when we have to tell people what we can and cannot do. And this may be our immediate family members. It may be the person at the grocery store. Particularly, it happens a lot at work. We might not be able to even change the toner in the copy thing because we can't, physically unlatch everything, or it may be a particular project. Now, a lot of times we don't even like to admit that there are things we can't do. I know I have a real stubborn streak, and it's hard to admit it to myself, much less vocalize it and share that with someone else and ask for help. So when people are facing this, what suggestions do you have to kind of get past this hump where we can communicate that thoroughly?
So that's such an important area that we all run into. And you're right, Lisa, so many of us are stubborn in that way and feel I should be able to do it. Or the other thing is I'm ashamed that I can't do it. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's just how much we can take on. Even, as you contacted me to be part of this effort, I'm very aware of how much I can take on in my life, and I try very carefully to parse out how many projects I will engage in, and then there are times I don't do as thorough a job on each project. So I found in my own work what I encourage clients to do is to try to be as rigorously honest with yourself, because if you don't start there and you let yourself slide, then stuff's going to happen. So in the case where a client found that she just wasn't doing her job the way she should be doing, she was missing deadlines, she was not getting to all of the paperwork she needed to get to, and she knew that her boss felt uncomfortable saying something to her. So here she had this situation where she felt, I need to bring it up, and yet she didn't know what to bring up even or where to start. What she did know was that her performance was going down, and sooner or later this was going to bite her. It was going to hurt her. So she needed to take charge of this situation, and that's what I suggest to people. Pay attention. If it's a one-time deal and you missed something because you weren't feeling, you had some brain fog that day, okay, that's all right. You don't need to call a lot of attention to it. But if you're seeing there's ongoing issues, either your absence or your medical appointments or something you're not doing the way you need to be doing it, it's up to you to take the responsibility, either by talking with others, by getting their assistance, or by acknowledging it. And what I often suggest is before you go in and dump it on your supervisor, figure out for yourself what you think needs to be different. So in this client's case, she really needed a different kind of a scheduler, and she needed to have different software there for herself because her brain fog was really getting in the way. And she also needed more feedback between her supervisor and her to see when things were getting done on time, which she didn't used to need. So she figured that out and then presented it to her supervisor, who said, okay, this is not a big deal. We can get that done. So my suggestion is, you don't always have a supervisor who's so positive. This guy was. But my suggestion is at least come up with some solutions on your own that might make this situation better. Of course, there are times in which there is nothing that can make the situation better, where the only thing that will make the situation better is if you leave, because you can't do the job the way it's supposed to get done. But that's a problem too, because in the end, you don't want to get fired. Yeah, you can collect unemployment if you get fired, but it's really going to be hard to find another job. I had one client say, well, at least if they fire me, I can get unemployment. True, but problem solving this is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes a lot smarter for you. At least you're showing your supervisor, your employer, that you want to do the right by this. You don't want to just slipshod out of it. And that goes a long way for future recommendations and for an employer's loyalty toward you. So as I said, there's no right answer here. There are places where you just know, you believe firmly that talking about this to anybody is going to you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Then you need to figure out on your own how to work around it. But where possible, your best bet is to try to talk to people about what you need to be different and come up with the solutions, some suggestions for how to make that happen. Once again, doing it as positively as you can, with as little apology, but as much acknowledgement as you can create.
I think that's great advice, and I think it's very true. A lot of times we take our problem to our supervisor or coworkers and expect them to try to figure out ways to solve it when we're the ones that know best what we need and what tools might work for us. And like you said, oftentimes I think most people give us the benefit of the doubt if we come with that to them and say, here's what I need. I'd like, a speaking software program for my computer. I need to be a little more accountable if we could meet 10 minutes every week, with a collection of different ideas. And usually when you bring solutions to a supervisor, they're much more open because they understand you've really spent some time on this instead of just bringing them the problems and making them try to figure it out.
Right.
Because everybody's busy.
Everybody's busy, and it's a subtle message because the message you're giving is, I know I have these symptoms that impact me and make it so that my performance is not as good as it should be right now, but I have some ideas how to change it. So you're really showing team effort. And people, even if you don't have to say it, people just, it's an underlying impression that you're creating. As I said, I've seen people do this in some environments, and it can backfire. Certainly at certain levels or certain kinds of companies, certain professions, you don't have this option so easily, and it takes a different kind of thinking about your job and what's possible.
Very true. One of the big issues, I think, in the workplace is we don't want to become known as that person with the health issues, that person who's always going to the doctor, the one who comes in late.
Yep. Right.
We don't want to have people talk about us at the copy machine or, become known as that sick one that always needs a favor or, never follows up on a project. How can we avoid that, especially if we're trying to do all these steps that you've spoken about? In addition to those, is there anything else we can do to try to avoid being that person in the office?
Well, once again, every office is different and cultures really vary. But one aspect that really stands out for me over the years is what you convey to other people. So if you show a lot of tension around getting out of the office on time for that appointment versus having really scheduled the appointment at a time where you're going to be able to leave comfortably and it doesn't make other people uncomfortable, that's going to go a long way. So what that means is that you don't want to create discomfort for other people around what's happening to you. So whether it's medical appointments or whether it is late to work that day, you want to seem as that you're in charge of your body, you are doing the best you can, and you're neither a victim nor are you taking advantage, but holding yourself with as much self-esteem without false pride. I'm not encouraging people to act as if, I'm better than you and look what I have to put up with. It's much more about just saying, I am doing the best that I can, and I'm trying to keep this all together. It's a tall order. It really is, especially when the idea of medical appointments, just this week I was talking with several people about this, how hard it is. Rarely can you go see your healthcare team around, you have to take off work time from work, and other people get upset. These things happen, but the less you're upset about it, and the more you make sure that everything is taken care of, the less other people are going to resent it. Now, that's true whether you miss days at work as well. It's all about you're trying to present a positive, take charge attitude with others, and being aware of where you might pick up the slack. One thing I do encourage people, I've heard too many people say to me, well, I work these extra long hours to try to make up for all the time when I'm not there, and I'm actually working a lot more than everyone else. That can do you in also. So it is a fine line, figuring out how to be sure that you're getting your work done, that it's not sliding onto other people so that they resent it, but by the same token, not overworking yourself so that and a lot of times people don't even notice that you're doing, so that you're exhausted and tired and making yourself sicker. It's finding that balance that's very important.
One of the things I hear you saying in different ways throughout our talk today is to really keep your emotions in check at work. And I think a lot of times men are used to this at work, but us women sometimes will go to work and over coffee share about our kids' day at school. We get into talking mode and we're just social. And yet I hear you saying that we need to be careful about not over-confiding. And I'm wondering, are there times, if you know you're going to be going in for a series of medical tests or appointments and you're going to be emotional after that, is it better to take off like the morning from work and try to make that up than coming in and gaining a couple extra hours but having tears in your eyes and throwing your purse down and breaking down in the bathroom? Is there a way to kind of gauge your emotions a little bit?
I think you've sort of answered that for yourself. I mean, if you think you're going to break down, you're going to be in the bathroom, what good are you doing at work?
Exactly, but yet sometimes, if the boss sees your coat on the chair, they know you're there, and that's good with them. They may not know what's going on.
And that's why there is no one answer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes simply clocking in and going and spending some time in the bathroom and pulling yourself together, or talking with your best friend there and pulling yourself together is what you need. There is no one answer, and that's what makes it very complicated. Whether it is at work, and I would say to you, this is in our personal lives as well. You show up at school picking up your kid and you're crying. It's pickup time at school, and you're in tears about something you just found out at a medical appointment, and all the other moms are standing around looking at you, or mom and dads, and that's not useful either. So, unfortunately, one of the truisms of living with chronic illness or a chronic health condition is that it can be pretty isolating. And we have to pick and choose the people that we trust to talk with. Typically, I encourage clients not to divulge a lot to supervisors. It puts the supervisor in a difficult, awkward position because that person has to assess you. And unless you have a long-standing friendship, that's different. But typically, when you've got a lot of emotional stuff going on and you're capable of making good friends, develop a good friendship with someone at work. That's going to be in your best interest over the long run anyway. Someone who you really can confide and who confides back on with you. Remembering that this is all about a level playing field. It's not just you burdening other people. But to go to your question of what's the best way of when should you take time off? This is really, once again, thinking strategically. What's in my best interest, and who am I, and how am I going to handle this best? What do I want to have happen? So the more you think in those terms and you focus on your behavior as well, it does normalize all of this, because whether it's work or whether we're now in a new environment when you have children and you create new relationships, or you're starting to volunteer in a new place, we all have developed skills over a lifetime for how we integrate in. Use your skills. Normalize yourself. By not thinking so much about your health as much as how do I want people to see me and how do I want to show up.
Okay. And I think, as we're talking about taking charge over our life, and I think one of the things I hear you saying and a lot of us struggle with is asking that question, what's in my best interest? Because a lot of us are used to never asking what's in our best interest.
Right.
We're trying to accommodate everybody around us as well as make up for what we feel their losses may be due to our illness.
Right.
So I think that's a good point, that when we look at what our best interests are, in the end, we probably will be also including the interests of those around us if we're taking care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And that too, as you know, as a mom, as a wife, as a sister, as a daughter, and as a coworker. In the end, the more you can take care of yourself, it means other people have to take care of you that much less. And the more you have to give. And people like people who can give to them. So going back to the question before, if you don't want to be known as that chronically ill person, well, be available to people. If you can't be as available physically, be available emotionally. Be that person that people want to talk to. Because that goes a long way, whether it's with your friends, your family, or your coworkers. It also will make you feel valuable and important, and not think as much about what you can't do.
Well, and that takes us right into your last point about attitude. We all hear if we had a better attitude, we could change things. Some of us hear if we had a better attitude, our pain would be less, or our illness would even be cured.
Yeah, right.
Right. I wish that was true. Right. I've tried to have a good attitude. But, we have moments where it's easy to have a good attitude and other times where it's a struggle, and we have to really, really make a choice to have a good attitude. What do you suggest that people think about when they're trying to be more positive?
Well, I practice this technique called focusing, and it's in between meditation and therapy in a way, and you can do it by yourself. But one thing I've learned from focusing is that that the more you allow feelings to emerge, the more you notice them and just let them be heard, then oftentimes you can move on more easily. And there is loss and there's grief on a daily, moment-to-moment basis when you live with disabling symptoms. And sometimes we're taught, ignore it. Don't pay attention, because that way you deny it so you can keep going. And in fact, there's whole schools of thought about all of that. And there is a place for denial, absolutely. And I'm a big believer in denial. But I'm mostly a believer in denial when it comes to worrying about the future. I don't think it's helpful to deny what's going on in the present. So if you're in pain or you're feeling extremely exhausted, no matter how busy you are, give yourself a moment to notice it. And we all struggle with this. But if you can, just allow yourself to acknowledge this is going on. It goes back to what we talked about before, taking care of yourself. We all lead, no matter what we do, we feel we lead pretty busy lives. And if our lives don't feel busy and we're incredibly bored, we're still not apt to pay attention and notice. Allow yourself to go to that feeling inside of your body and just be there. No judgments, No negative thoughts about it. No history as to why I'm feeling this way, because yesterday I ran the marathon. Silly me. None of that. Just to notice. Many times it gives space and it can help your attitude. Attitude is something that we can shape, but mood is really hard to shape. And if we're really in a sad mood or a crummy mood because we're feeling bad, it's hard to break that. We have to acknowledge that and allow ourselves to notice it. And once you do, then think about what can I do that might improve my mood. Taking it step by step rather than just giving up. And working to improve that mood is really a big task for most people in this world, not just people with health conditions, but certainly when you're faced with chronic health conditions, it's even harder.
Well, thank you so much, Rosalind. This has been really helpful, and I know our listeners are going to learn a lot. And tell us a little bit about your website and the book that you have so people can find out more information on this.
Sure. The website is cicoach.com, and there are free resources on there, downloadable articles, the link to my blog, Working with Chronic Illness. There's actually a page there where you can read about the book and order the book that way, or you can order it through Amazon. The book is called Women Work in Autoimmune Disease, Keep Working Girlfriend, and it's really for women but also for men. And it's not necessarily a push to keep working if you don't want to work, but it is designed to encourage people who want to work to keep doing it and to give them the tools for how to keep doing it, if this is what they believe is best for them. So those are some resources that I offer there, and then there's also lots of information about my coaching and my sliding scale and everything else that's on the website. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter.
I recommend her book. It's a great book, and I know that you'll find lots of things there on her website that are helpful for you. So thank you so much for being with us today, Rosalind. I appreciate everything you do, and you're always a real encouragement.
My pleasure.